Welcome to this webinar on the immune system, energy healing for the immune system. I'm really grateful that everybody's here joining me. Description of what is energy healing, and then we'll do 3 minutes of silence, prayer of gratitude, brief overview of yesterday, and then diving into today's questions. And if you have questions coming up as we're going along, feel free to insert them into the question and answer box. What is energy healing? Energy healing is a technology, essentially, of consciousness based on the premise and on the SCI principle. Thank you to Maharishi for giving us the principles of the science of creative intelligence that outer depends on inner. Outer depends on inner. The inner reality comes first, and then it gives rise to the outer expression. So everything in the outer material world evolves from the inner ocean of pure being, pure absolute bliss consciousness, pure unbounded Parabrahman. So that's the first principle of energy healing, is that if things aren't showing up nicely at the surface, then we need to go inside and see what is the foundation. So the way it looks to me is that we've got the ocean of unbounded being at the source of creation. And then there are strata of more abstract to more concrete expressions of reality that sort of rise up out of that ocean of pure consciousness. And that strata of more abstract to more concrete acts a little bit like a filter. At least that's what it looks like to me. That consciousness, the abstract layers of consciousness tend to define like the impulse of pure potential is rising out of the source of creation constantly. And then the more abstract layers of consciousness kind of sort of clamp down or isolate down that pure potential so that it goes in particular directions, like branches. You could think of like branches of a tree coming out from the source of creation, something like that. And the, as the impulse to express the impulse of pure potential to express itself becomes more and more concrete, that defining down becomes more and more intense until eventually we get structure at this level of creation, this physical material, very highly defined. Look at those edges of my chair, right? Like really highly defined level of creation. And so this area between the source of creation and the physical material level of creation is like a big filter, essentially. And so the first principle is that outer depends on inner. The second principle is that we have access to that entire filter. We have access to that field, that's actually us. That whole field from the concrete material level of self into the more abstract levels of self, like emotions and thoughts, right? Feelings, and then even to more abstract levels of thoughts, like levels of very kind of deep visceral perception, for example, or ancient memories. There's a whole collective feel of the inner world, the inner reality of all of us interfaces with the inner reality of everybody else. So there's, as you go in, it becomes more and more abstract as awareness fathoms in. So one of the things that I find really fascinating about energy healing is that any illness that the body experiences provides a vehicle for an internal exploration as to what might cause that illness in the first place. And the internal exploration itself is quite thrilling. It's quite brilliant. It's quite exciting. It's something that's worth doing, certainly for the effect of the body healing itself, but also just in and of itself. The inner exploration is a journey of self-discovery, essentially. And the awareness goes, it says, oh, something's not comfortable at the surface, whether it's physical or whatever. And the awareness starts to dive in, but what's the source of it? What's the cause of it? And it goes deeper, deeper, deeper. And eventually awareness finds its way back to the source of creation. And then at that moment, it's like, oh, it's all the self, right? There's that big, unified, beautiful, glorious, eternal, quality-less, silent ocean of one's own deepest inner self. And so it's like this beautiful thing, really. And in energy healing, mostly for those of you who are familiar with my knowledge base and have checked out the 112-point matrix, which is, if you search alphabetically, it's like the first entry in the knowledge base. We know that, and this is also a little bit a review from yesterday, but I will do the prayer of gratitude, I promise, in the silence. But we know that the physiology, so our system has these 7 channels through which it can reach the source of creation. We can reach the source of creation by any of the five senses of perception, or mind and intellect. And I think I spoke yesterday about how paradox is the tool by which the intellect transcends, because the nature of the intellect is to discriminate or discern. So this part's black and that part's blue, and this is up and this is down. And the job of the intellect is to help us navigate our way through the field of differences. And when we're faced with a paradox, but it's actually up and down at the same time, then all of a sudden the intellect goes, oh, I think I don't get it. And at that point, awareness is able to, it expands very suddenly past the intellect and takes a dive into the field of wholeness. And I was thinking the other day of how puns do the same thing for the intellect, which is why we laugh at puns, because the source of creation is very blissful. Like that field of pure being is just a delight. It's a delight to experience. And the thing about a pun is it gets you into this space where you're anticipating the direction that the discernment is going to go, right? What is it? Groucho Marx was a famous punster. And, what does he say? Last night, I shot an elephant in my pajamas. What he was doing in my pajamas, I do not know. So, right. So first it's like you think, oh, the idea is going in this one direction. And then at the last second it turns and it's like, oh, wait a minute. It could be both at the same time, actually. Oh, it could be both. And then the intellect goes, oh, wait, I can't, no. And the awareness transcends and the bliss is experienced. Okay, so much for what is energy healing. Oh, lol, is it a joke? No, I don't know. Anyway, everything, ultimately, it becomes a kind of great big umbrella into which everything falls, essentially. But the principle or the premise remains the same. This is a kind of a simple underlying principle here, that we take the material expression of discomfort or suffering, and we follow it back to its source. And from the perspective, as we follow back to what is the seed of that suffering, awareness has to naturally fathom the more abstract layers of creation, so it expands. Broader perspective is gained. Broader perspective provides the resources for dealing with that problem, essentially. So it's kind of simple. Okay. Let's do our 3 minutes of silence. I like to do that at the beginning because that gives us all a chance to just kind of dive in and experience those subtler levels of the consciousness, the field of consciousness, and the source of creation, for those of you who are comfy with that experience. And I'm going to turn off my microphone and let you know when 3 minutes are up. And when we do that, definitely take some time to come out gently, because the more slowly and gently we come out of our inner spaces of the mind, the inner landscape, the more we retain, just like coming out of dream and sleep state, right? If you come out a little bit slowly and you pay attention, you remember your dreams better. So it's the same thing. It integrates. All right, let's close our eyes. All right. Let's take a few moments before opening the eyes. Silence, so luscious. So luscious. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being all of us, for being the whole universe, all of our loved ones, for being the great eternal tradition of wisdom that connects the absolute unmanifest field of being with the entire manifest field of expression. Thank you for our webinar hour, that it may be used in the most valuable way for each person participating, both now and anyone who watches these recordings in the future. May we isolate out the seed or source of any problems and address that in the most efficacious way. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here with you. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be of service, and I am grateful. Okay, so let's do a little review of some of the points that we covered yesterday. Already such good questions coming into. I'll do the review and then we'll go into people's questions. So, the immune system is centered with the thymus, which is a gland here at the bowl in the ribs. It bows out right there. So there is an endocrine connection with the immune system. And there's also a big circulatory connection with the immune system. This isn't exactly a review of yesterday, but anyway, I guess I'm working my way into it. Anyway, yeah, so when we're working and dealing with uplifting or healing 4 systems of the body, we're working at a level that should ideally or logically bring a kind of an overall upliftment to the whole system, because to every part of the body uplifts. And a lot of illnesses that seem to show up as kind of overall feelings of just feeling like low on energy, fatigue, just kind of generally uncomfortable, are often connected to a system's failure, right? Because if an entire system fails, then the whole body definitely experiences that. If you have just like one tooth maybe is having some issue, then you go to the dentist, you get the one tooth fixed, and it's better. But when it's a whole system, then both the falling ill, but also the rising up back into health can make a difference, all over difference, particularly in things like your energy levels and clarity of mind and digestive capacity and so forth. So I'm trying to think what else we covered. I talked about putting the hands on the chest area and using the hand chakras to sort of nurture and to uplift and uphold the health of the thymus. And when you do that, it's partly about putting the hands over the thymus area. It helps direct the awareness, but the other part of that is actually directing the awareness with some intention. You can, when you put your hands over some area of the body, allow the awareness to penetrate through the layers of the skin, actually into the internal core of the body, and find that organ. Find that little thymus in there. Feel it. Feel its boundaries and limitations. How tall is it? How wide is it? How thick is it? So you can actually move your perception into the fleshy form of the body, and you can find parts of yourself. It's good to do that. It's just like this morning, I walked out of my room and my granddaughter was there. And the minute she saw me, she's like, ah, she doesn't talk. She's 11 months old, but she was beside herself. And oh, she was so cute in this little frilly yellow dress. And so, yeah, that was just a moment. But it's like your organs are like that. Like it's not a usual thing that we'll go and think intentionally, oh, I shall now put my attention on my gallbladder or some organ or another. But when we do, they're like, oh, you put attention on me. Oh my God. Oh my God. So nourishing. Make my day. Make my day. So the organs are like that. They really, really do appreciate our attention. And if an organ hasn't been receiving the attention it needs and starts to fall ill, it's that suffering or discomfort in the organ that draws the attention in and is fundamental. It's the drawing of the attention that is fundamental to the healing process, because the more attention goes there, the more body resources of all sorts go into that organ and support its healthy transformation. Everything in the relative is constantly changing. So question being, just feeling everyone putting their attention in the areas that need it the most. I'm also feeling a lot of discordant feelings being released. I'm noticing that for each person, as the awareness or attention goes into the area of the body that is crying the hardest, that it's reminding me of that baby. She's now at home full time with us caring for her during the day, as well as running this business. But when she was at daycare, I'd walk in and the daycare provider would say, oh, she had a great day. She seemed fine. And she would look up at me and just burst into tears, because it was like, oh God, you're finally here. And now I can tell you how I really feel. I was being so strong. I was being a little 4-month-old strong person and trying to like hold it together, even though it was hard, right? So that can happen sometimes. You get your attention in on the part that hurts. And it's like, oh, all this flow and the flow and the flow. And in energy healing, one of the things that we do is we integrate the ability to deal with that darkness, to deal with that negativity. And this is definitely a review of yesterday. I spent a fair bit of time looking into the mechanics and the dynamics of how do we deal with really unpleasant, really uncomfortable, really difficult energies. And I know we've looked at that principle before. Of course, indifference toward negativity is a main principle, but also the delight in the virtuous. The Vedic saying, it's a Vedic philosophy: friendliness to the happy, compassion for the unhappy, delight in the virtuous, and indifference toward the wicked. And does that come from Patanjali? I think, I believe I read that in the Science of Yoga. Pretty sure. Anyway. Delight in the virtuous extends to our own virtuous behavior and how we handle the negativity. Once we've identified the negativity and really gotten a good, deep look at it, you really can't cultivate a strategic approach to dealing with negativity unless you take a good look at it. You need to know what you're dealing with. So we take the good, hard look at the problem and the energy there, and all those, as I was feeling the awareness going into the parts that hurt, all those deep discordant feelings starting to come out. And this was one of the healings I think we did yesterday, was for each person here plus their ancestors, of how do I handle my relationship with myself when I find this big pocket of negativity within myself, right? There's an old patterning, old conditioning and habits from the ancestral lineage that, well, if I find some bit of negativity, or I find that I'm making a mistake, or I messed up somehow, well, then I have to really beat myself up about that. And unfortunately, that's not really the most effective way to handle finding that negativity. In fact, whatever pockets of negativity are found, or whatever dark energies are found within oneself, these are the vehicles of opportunity. These are the vehicles to, if you find you've made a terrible mistake, that's the opportunity to learn and don't make that mistake next time, right? It's really quite simple. And the thing is that an individual, it's like we ease into these experiences. So if you find, so it can feel like, well, isn't that like opening Pandora's box? Like I find my way into some negative dark spaces in me, but then it's like, oh my gosh, it's like mountains and mountains of material to try to sift through. What's known as the dark night of the soul is that moment when a person decides to just handle the whole of it as much as possible in the moment. Handle the whole of it in the moment. And it's a little bit like wrestling with a monster, because what you find is that there is this side of the self that's kind of unconstrained or unfettered level of laws of nature that are responsible for the one breaking apart into pieces. That's really what the negativity is. It's a way of not experiencing the integration of the one as it's breaking into pieces. And we could say that all negativity is basically that. It's the separation process, the diversification process occurring, but the one hasn't integrated into it yet. And then there was this point, of course, where there's this big integration process that occurs, and the one shows up as the many, and then it enters into the many. And once that entering has occurred, and of course, we as humans, we are fundamental players in that part of the cycle, in that part of the process. The entering of the one into the many is essentially activated through our life experience, through us, because our awareness is pure oneness material. It's pure source material. So where we focus our attention is really important, right? And in energy healing, we focus our attention on the part that hurts, because that's where the greatest potential for the one to integrate resides, in the body. So no beat yourself up. We don't beat ourselves up. We don't think, oh, I'm a terrible person. Oh, I need to feel guilty about that. No. It's just that when the presentation of the diverse field of creation is there, it can be so fascinating and so compelling that the fascination and compellingness of it tends to overshadow the awareness of wholeness, unmanifest, unbounded totality. That's all. And so then the awareness goes in and it starts to fathom deeper, deeper, deeper into whatever that, maybe say it's a beautiful painting, my beautiful painting back here. We fathom into the beautiful painting, and then we see deeper, deeper, deeper what's going on in that painting. And then eventually awareness comes into the source of creation. And the painting at the surface is seen as an expression of that oneness that underlies it, that is responsible for its expression in the first place. The whole thing leads to evolution and development of the sense of self. And I have found that the seed of pretty much every illness comes back to that. It's very simple. It comes back to some part of oneself was not fully integrated with divine source being. And so a process occurs by which that piece of the self that's feeling separated, is feeling, even I believe that's a description of the Vedic term pragya parad, which is called the mistake of the intellect, is that some part of the system finds itself isolated out or somehow separate from wholeness of the whole body. And so in that part, that organ or that system, we come back and we reestablish the connection through with our awareness back to the source of creation. And a lot of times Western medicine is really helpful because the doctor can say, well, I'm going to give you this medication, and this medication is going to heal your whatever, thymus or your immune system. And then what happens is that every time we take the medication, there's that sense of prevailing over the problem, of getting past the limitations that are sitting with that organ or that system. And that energy of being able to prevail is the energy that allows the one to enter into the parts of the many and to integrate. Because it's like quite the paradox that the one, which is quality-less, unbounded, eternal, is trying to show up in the form of little structures and forms. And as such, it's trying to find itself in those structures and forms bound by space-time. It's like impossible, really seems impossible. But there's kind of a leap that takes place. A leap of awareness is often motivated by discordant feelings or pain or something sometimes, or at least the purification process at the very least, some kind of intentional devotion and service to wholeness, and the choice of selecting evolution over comfort. It's very, very often marks that moment. Anyway, okay, I think that's about enough for yesterday. We also talked about memory a little bit, because the immune system and our relationship with viruses and other types of invaders, but viruses especially, I think, what is it, 17% of the genome, human genome, is viral information that has been integrated into our systems and our bodies over centuries and centuries of human beings dealing with various viruses. All of the placental information is viral, and most of the memory. There's so much in that. It's absolutely lovely. But let's get to a few questions, because like already I just talked for half an hour. So I'm going to start with this awesome question that came in on the online question and answer box. Could one call the filter, okay, that area, that subtle inner landscape, angelic frequency in nature? And I would say yes, absolutely. Good question. The way it looks to me is that we have the subtlest level, right? Oh, no. This organize. Okay, here we go. One is the source of everything. So that infinite potential starts to rise up first in the very most delicate, most subtle level of creation. And we were all there. You and I, all of us were in that place where the one started to rise up into the subtlest level of expression, right? And when we went from the wholeness, the humming Om wholeness of one, into the subtlest level of expression, all of a sudden there were differences. And the differences at first, when we rose into that layer of creation, we were like, dang, this is interesting. There are all these differences, you know, there's black and white and up and down. It's all these differences. And so at that point, at that first initial moment of presence in the subtlest field of creation, our bodies were like made of light, and they hadn't completely fully integrated wholeness or totality in them. And so there's this period, it could have been billions of years, I don't know, but it was a long time that we were working with just being like very kind of angelic level beings, and working with the darkness and working with the light. And like, so I mean, like, in other words, when I say darkness and light, I mean working with the forms of separation that feel separate from wholeness, and then integrating them so that we're experiencing the separate forms of creation, but they're integrated with wholeness. And we realize, oh, it really is just all wholeness. And there's a process that the soul goes through just at that first level of creation, the very first. So what it means is we start out, you could say, if we talk in terms of angels and such, you could say that we start out kind of demonic and we become angelic through that evolutionary process. But I'm inclined to think of it in larger terms. Once the soul has broken across the barrier from the absolute to the finest relative and has gotten over the initial shock of, hey, wow, there are differences, and has moved into that space of there are differences, yes, but it's really all one. And that causal level is like an ocean. It's an ocean, a big ocean. And we navigate it from our human perspective by dividing it up into regions. And the regions create resonating spaces that allow that pure potential from the source of creation to get into the resonating space and to hum in specific frequencies that gives rise to specific laws of nature. Once we've done that, and it's completely, our causal physiologies are completely integrated with wholeness, then the awareness is ready to rise up to the next level of expression, which is the astral level. And I'm just giving these random names. I'm not so sure that it's like so linear exactly as I'm saying, and that there's actually strict dividing lines. It could be, it feels to me sometimes like it's more like a spectrum of more and more dense expression, but we move up to a level that we can deal with it comfortably. And again, we have to go through that process of integrating the more dense, the more defined physiology, integrating it with wholeness. But it's like tuning the strings of a violin. Anybody who's done that knows that you start on the low string, you start on the G string and you tune the G string. And then you go up to the next string, which is the D string. You start to tune the D string. But of course, when you tune the D string and you tighten it, it changes the tension on the neck of the violin, and on the bridge and all the parts. And so the G string goes out of tune. So then you have to go back and retune the G string again. So then you go back and retune the G string, you go back and kind of do fine tune on the D string, then you go up to the next string, which is the A string, you start tuning that, and of course that puts the D and the G out of tune again. So it goes like that for us too, that we've tuned up when we first emerge from the source of creation, we tune ourselves up. We're not taking into consideration all this physical, material, human-like experience. We're just tuning up the causal body. Just getting the causal body so that like that causal body knows itself to be one and it's functioning in such a way that wholeness is completely integrated. Then we go up to the next level, and right now I'm calling that the astral level, and that's the level where, if we think of the causal body as kind of a little bit like static, because we've got regions of the causal body that can be defined, but at the astral level, the humming and the presence of the laws of nature start to move. And so at the astral level, we have this field of the web of life, and all the life force and the life forms in the web of life look like strings or snakes or filaments. You could say filaments of light, golden light. So we tune up at that level. But when we tune up at the astral level, then we have to go back and we have to recalibrate our causal body, because the causal body original tuning was more like a sketch, right? Because it didn't take into account the astral body and the astral level. So we tune up the astral body, we go back and we get like more fine tuning on the causal body, and then the awareness, right? So these are many, many, many lifetimes. These are many lifetimes flowing by. And then the awareness goes up to a higher level, the level of feeling the emotional body. And also the aura is between the astral body and the emotional body, or we could say it's like the very finest level of the emotional body, is that our feelings come out as frequencies of light color, right? But anyway, so we do the tuning there, but then we have to go back obviously and tune the lower levels or the deeper levels and so forth. And so here we are at the human level. And what are we doing? We are acting as instruments for the integration of divine being the one wholeness of creation in this material level of reality. Very, very dense compared to where we've been, right? And earth element there, very dense earth element. And we know from the cosmologists that if we look out further, we find that there are worlds that are even more dense than ours. Regarding the angelic frequency, we don't lose touch with the causal level. That's where the angelic energies reside, that we call in the traditions of earth, in the traditions of various religions and systems of spiritual thought, angels and all sorts of archetypal forms like divine justice and divine truth, and the Hindu gods and the Greek gods. And I was talking with Malika the other day, and she said, oh, she realized that the Archangel Michael was actually, in Hinduism, was Indra. And it was like, oh, yes. As soon as she said it, it was like, oh, yes, right. The energy frequency is the same energy frequency. So it doesn't matter what religion, the truth is one, the wise know it by many names, right? So we've got these regions, commonly held regions. This is what the archetypes are. Also the planets. The planets are another form of ourself that we all hold in common, right? So those combinations of personality qualities that are possessed by the planets they represent various regions that are unique to us as humans on the earth, but not so much unique to any kind of humanoid person living in some other solar system. It's something that the universe has kind of cultivated for us, like our little earth garden has cultivated, that we would have these certain types of geomagnetic influences on our little human physiologies that would cause us to kind of naturally, spontaneously, innocently divide up our causal field into these specific areas. So you've got the robust, uplifting teacher, Jupiter, and then you've got more the serious teacher, Saturn, and you've got the female form that oversees the ephemeral pleasures of this reality. And then you've got, the sun in its administrative brightness and so forth and so forth. These are archetypes. So when a person is dealing with dark demonic energies, they are dealing with areas of their own causal body that require a very big tuning. It requires being tuned up in a big way. And for whatever reason, as that soul was evolving up through the layers, that particular area didn't get fully, it didn't get sort of minor adjustments. The minor adjustments that needed to be made along the way didn't get made as well as they could. And so then the person comes into the human life and they're like, dang, that area really needs a lot of attention. It can be very uncomfortable, but once it's done, it's done. So that's the relief. Oh, yes. One lady saying, a lady from Croatia, I love you. She's saying that Krishna and Christ both have the same first sounds. Yeah, their names have very similar, aren't they? Just the brief story on that one is that a very dear girlfriend of mine was on a very small residence course with Maharishi back many years ago, and it was Christmas Day, and it was early in the morning. They had just arrived, and he said, so just ask me anything. And the man stood up and said, well, when he was a child, he really loved Christ. He was raised in a Christian household, and he felt a real affinity to Jesus. And he felt as soon as he asked the question, there was kind of like a tension or nervousness that went through the group, because, Maharishi is obviously from the Vedic tradition, and there was this thought like, well, maybe what this man is saying is going to be offensive. There's a lot of rules in the Indian culture regarding like how you respectfully address the teacher, so people were a little nervous, like, what about this question? But in a moment, Maharishi just laughed and said, well, all the masters are masters of the holy tradition. So in the Vedic tradition, there's this tradition of masters that goes back to Narayana, which is the first impulse that arises from the source of creation, not human, but first impulse that arises that turns the energies of the source of creation around from their folding in on their own nature to coming out and expressing itself as the manifest creation. There's like a catalyst energy that's right there, and that's Narayana. And I think we've broken down the name Narayana in previous webinars and analyzed syllable by syllable how that works. So I invite you to review that if you have access to it. And if not, note to my husband, maybe I should make that as an individual video for the YouTube. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, he laughed and he said, all the masters are masters of the holy tradition. And again, that brings us back to the point that the truth is one, the wise know it by many names. And when I think of Christ, I think of that phrase from the Bible that, and I'm not an expert on the Bible any more than I'm an expert on Vedic science. So, please don't quote me directly. You can find it from the original source, but it's something like through no one finds the Father but through me. It's something like that through me one finds the Father. And from my perception, the Christ energy tends to sit up in the upper chakras over the head, in the area of the higher self, in the area where we connect to our divine source. So it becomes, again, Christ stands in that position as the glue or the instrument through which, as human beings, we find our way back to wholeness, and that divinity is integrated into our physical level of creation. But all the forms of the holy tradition are like that. There are many forms like that. It just depends on which branch of religion you belong to, because some branches of religion are very kind of limited in their definition of what is that connection. And well, it's only this one archetypal form, Jesus Christ, and nothing else will ever be able to substitute for that. But that's with a very broad definition, of course, and that allows that energy that is the connector energy between us as humans and the source of creation to embrace and contain all the different bridge forms. There are many bridge forms. Remember, I was talking about how the intellect, we can transcend from the intellect through puns and through paradoxes. Well, we can transcend, you can transcend through the sense of sight or the sense of sound or the sense of touch. Through the mind, we can transcend through the mind. And we can, anyway, if you look at the 112-point matrix offering on my website, you can read more about that. And I need to upgrade it because there's a whole area that I had a big aha awakening about that in the last month. So, but let's go on with our questions. Here's a beautiful question. I feel unable to express anger or sometimes know it exists because I was not allowed to express or feel anger as a child. Oh, that's really common. Anybody else had that experience that as a child it was like inappropriate? Yeah. Oh yeah, hands raised for sure. In order to survive, I had to behave as if everything was fine. I think this is true for many trauma survivors. Oh, lots more people raising their hands too. Yeah. Yeah, trauma survivors. There we go. And of course, yesterday I was talking about the role of anger and how it's really one of the main tools of the immune system. Bringing it back to, oh gosh, hands are just raising like wild over here. I've got, bless your hearts, bless all of your hearts, bless you all, bless you all. I think we all experience that to some point, to some degree or another. And the reason is that a child has to learn that when things don't go their way, there are tools that they can use to get things to go their way, but just having a fussy fit is not one of them. That doesn't mean, though, that you're not using your anger. Sometimes using anger involves feeling that something is wrong and it needs to change, and then cultivating a course of action that will be appropriate and effective based on the situation at hand. And that's ultimately how we have to handle our anger. And this is ultimately the role of the immune system. This is what it does. The immune system literally seeks out problems and imbalances and invaders and exploitation in the body, and then has to formulate a course of action that will allow the body to eliminate that exploitative energy without damaging the body itself. This is exactly how we handle anger. And so it happens to little kids a lot, is that they feel frustrated and angry and they can't just explode. So they get sick. Little kids get sick a lot. All you mommies out there know this, right? You know, there's childhood diseases is like a major thing. And so what happens when a child gets a childhood disease? Well, their body physically goes through the process of prevailing or overcoming something that was not okay. They get, on a physiological level, a little kind of tasting experience of the entire cycle of how do you deal with that kind of darkness? How do you deal with a problem where something really does not belong in the body and it has to be eliminated? And you have to bring up those, that very sort of forceful, they're actually cells, immune system cells that actually kill. They are killer cells. They murder. They murder bacterias and funguses and molds and parasites. And I didn't mention viruses because, as I mentioned yesterday, I think viruses aren't technically considered alive, but from my perception, from my perspective, that classification could change because of some advances in modern science, which are yet to actually fully make their way out into the public. So anyway, I would say that viruses act with intelligence. And so maybe they don't fit into all the categories of living things, but boy, they definitely act with intelligence. So on some level, there's some kind of consciousness there. Anyway, the immune system has to rise up in a forceful manner, really, in a manner that doesn't take everybody's comfort into consideration. It doesn't take the comfort of viruses and bad bacteria, etc., into consideration when it goes after them. And that's not a bad thing. Sometimes it happens that if somebody is really badly out of line, the action that must be taken is taken, even if that person finds it inconvenient or uncomfortable. The action is taken, and then how the individual responds to their life becoming a little bit more uncomfortable is in their court. You know, are they going to take that as an opportunity to grow? Oh, you pointed out that someone made a mistake. Well, are they going to say, okay, then here we go. I can like learn from this mistake and I will not make this mistake in the future. Or do they sit there beating themselves up for a while and, you know, you hurt me. Now I'm a victim. So we have to think about how people handle that. And of course, always the responsibility is on both sides, right? Always one thinks, how could I have handled that situation even more delicately? How could I have taken the step to be more sensitive, put myself in their shoes and be more sensitive to what the need of that particular situation was in order to help that person move through that lesson that they needed to learn? The answer is that process integrates when awareness makes its way to wholeness. When awareness goes all the way back to the source of creation, then the action that comes forward is the appropriate action for that particular situation. And then at that point, if the person still is having trouble, you know, it's definitely the whole issue has pointed to the area that they need to put some attention on. And it very compassionately, like a mother, you know, a mother teaching her children, then one is helped to put the attention where it goes without creating a lot of self-damage or self-sabotage, etc. Clearing, this is a big, actually it's a healing that's going on, and there's a lot of conditioning and patterning of self-sabotage. It's the same thing that we did yesterday, only it looks like it's we're going back and retuning one of those early strings there. It's going in and readapting there so that the initial response to the realization of, oh, I messed up, is I go in. I go into the source of creation. Oh, I screwed up. Okay, I go in. Just like that. Because if I messed up and then I have to deal with something, well, if I go in, then I will find the resources that I need to deal with it in the most effective way. And I also create a condition within my body and my being that allows me to, it allows my own healing energies to come forward without resistance. So for the immune system, the part of the self that is responsible for putting things in place, for setting healthy boundaries, for defining the last flops of the wave of expression, wholeness, right? First it comes up pure potential, and then eventually there's these final, you know, why the hair went this way today instead of some other different way. I don't know, you know, but these last little forms of creation, that in those final flops of creation, that wholeness is present even there. And in the case of the lady who had this experience of very difficult in childhood, and obviously a lot of others of you as well, we should just take a moment and bring our awareness back to the childhood self and bring this body of this download of information that we've been working with over the last 3-4 minutes to that little child self, because our little child self is really flexible. And there's a lot that you can integrate even outside the constraints of space and time. So we just take our awareness back into time, into those moments of the early childhood when one was not allowed to express anger. And what we're doing is providing the big self, the big, how many people have had that thought? I'm sure you don't even have to raise your hands. It's okay. I think we've all had the thought, oh, if I could just go back in time and I could redo what I did back then with what I know now, right? Like that's so common. It's a cliche, right? Well, in a way, in a sense, this is what we do, is that we take our awareness in the present moment and we focus it, we project it back into the past, into these moments when we were trying to communicate to parents or other family members or other individuals that, you know, they've crossed a line and something somewhere, a line has been crossed, and some respect. Can I have some respect here in my little 2-year-old diapered self? You know, can I have some respect? And going back in time to those moments where the anger was not allowed. And open the door. It looks like the big self here in the present is opening the door for the little self, starting with compassion, obviously, and understanding, recognition of the dynamics of what was going on, and the dynamics of the fact that you were often dealing with adults who hadn't mastered their own relationship with anger. So you have people you're dealing with who they don't know how to handle their anger. They don't know how to handle that situation. So rather than being able to guide you through your uncomfortable, challenging moments, they just, you know, brought the hammer down. They just reacted. They reacted the way they would react if an adult did something like that. And of course, that's almost always going to be an overreaction for a child, because children are so sensitive, especially little girls, very, very sensitive. Little boys tend to be a little more robust, a little bit more resilient, a little bouncy, but not always. There can be, you know, some boys more sensitive, some girls more tough. But the end of the story is that we all got more tough. We all became a little more tough from those experiences. And along with that feeling of, oh, the way I'm trying to express myself, this anger that I'm feeling, the way I'm trying to express it is not okay and it's not acceptable. Along with that comes a frustration of, and the person that I'm dealing with They can't help me. They can't say, well, honey, if you can think of a better way to do that, if you can, like, what was it? The child is doing the paints on the white carpet. And so I'm like, no, you can't do the paints on the white carpet. Like, that's completely unacceptable. So then it's like, well, crying because I can't do my white paints. No, you can take the white paints down into the basement on the tile floor. That's fine. Or you can take it outside onto the sidewalk. That's fine. So then the child starts to figure out, well, if I want to fulfill my desire and I want to pursue this particular line of fulfillment or expression or learning what I'm doing, then I have to become a little more discriminating. What is the actual complaint here? It's not just as flat out, no, I can't do anything, right? It's like, well, yeah. So we test. So we're still with the child self. We're with the child self knowing, okay, I can't be angry, but now I test. Like, how much of the anger can I bring out? And how can I bring it out? And how can I make it come out to the surface so that it comes out in the light of truth, so that the adults that I'm dealing with, who need me to teach them how to deal with their anger, right? So these adults can understand a deeper reality that's going on here, which is, I need to do certain things in order to evolve myself, in order to grow to be a functional adult or human. And in order to do that, I need to know right from wrong, right? I need to try, oh, is this okay if I do this? Oh, no, it's not okay, right? So we're following with the awareness has gone back to the little child self, and now is starting at the first moment when that anger tried to crop up, it was not acceptable, and now following the little child self through the process of that evolution of, how do I deal with my anger? How do I carry it forward into my world on the platform of truth? Big truth, absolute truth. And here's where we run into another problem. Sometimes the adults are busy avoiding the truth. They don't want to see the truth. They don't want to know the truth. Sometimes if the truth comes in too concentrated of a form, the soul can't integrate it sufficiently. And the net result is they reject the truth. Oh, I think I'd rather just be in denial about that. Thanks anyway. So that's the second part of the download for little child self, is the truth comes forward, but it has to come forward regulated in packages that makes it possible for the adults to integrate it. And that's where I feel we've come into a pocket of deep sadness in the body. And I see that deep sadness, particularly in the lower chakras, first, second, third, but coming up all the way up to the throat area. And that's where I stopped. I constrained myself and I didn't let myself speak my truth because I was angry, and I knew that if I expressed my truth, that how angry I was, I would get in trouble. So from the pelvic floor all the way up to the throat area, that area is undergoing a bit of a transformation right now. Just the little segment of truth, just enough truth that it's not overwhelming, right? But it's doable. And the net result is a redefinition of oneself in terms of divine form. So here, from the pelvic floor up to the neck, is a redefinition of oneself in terms of divine form. So much compassion. It's really all of it's riding on this sort of powerful combo of truth and compassion. And I'm feeling a lot of those like big chunks of discordant feelings being released from the system, which is beautiful, in the context of our webinar. We can do this kind of group healing work. And we've created with our collective a kind of very, very supportive environment where you have your privacy, but there's the sort of presence of other individuals who are also working on the same thing. So it's really a very nice sort of ripe environment to allow the body to let go of deeper potions or portions of stress in a way that's very graceful, it's very gentle, It's very easy to integrate, very easy to integrate that shift as the negativity and the discordant feelings and all those feelings of like being betrayed a lot of times by the adult population or by the environment. There's lots of dark feelings that are able to be released from the body and from the system. Thank you. And I mean, I see all kinds of stuff coming out, all kinds. We're churning. We, as humans, are participating in that churning of the ocean of consciousness by bringing our awareness down into the causal level of our physiologies. And when we focused our awareness back on the little child self, we're really just being in that flow of awareness, very, very close to the source of creation. And we have the dark energies and the light energies, and they're churning that ocean, and all kinds of unwanted material that had been collected and held in the body for decades is gracefully released. Just gracefully released. I'm just feeling that release happening. And it opens the door for the establishment of a very like honorable and dignified sense of self, which is something that the children often find themselves. That's the other side of that picture, is like, we're not treated honorably. We're not allowed to be as dignified as grown-ups and things like that. It just goes with the territory. But this healing is mostly for helping to align everybody in this webinar, align everybody's relationship with the way they deal with negativity, especially anger, in such a way that there's more balance and there's more discrimination. And the increased balance and discrimination goes to the thymus, and it goes to the immune system, and it helps the immune system function in a way which really helps you. Is it brings confidence, first of all, to the immune system. So the immune system's like, okay, I can go into some really dense areas. For those of you who are dealing with, cancer, for example, I can go into this dense area. Don't have to be afraid. The immune system can enter that dense area, and it knows that it has the resources required to actually start to turn the epigenomic structure in those cancer cells around. Before then, it's like, I don't feel like I have the resources. I'm not allowed to express my anger. What am I going to do? So it's just going to the whole thing's going to go out of hand. Well, no, it's not going to go out of hand. You have the resources to do this. And we're doing it now. We're just doing it now. The light of dignity and the energy frequency of grace, that expression of the source of creation, becomes the value that comes in and replaces all those discordant feelings. Grace is one of the most amazing ways that the source of creation shows up. When it shows up as grace, it shows up like with the full complement of all the laws of nature. We could say the full complement of all the angelic forms, all those centuries and centuries that you spent moving from feeling separate and really not connected to the source of creation to feeling fully integrated with the source of creation, that all that level of accomplishment and achievement kind of stands behind it, sort of fuels the expression of grace in the relative. As you can see, I'm still working on my definition of grace, because it's a very abstract thing. It's very beautiful, though, very powerful, very beautiful. What happens to cells discriminated against? Oh, that's such a good question. Cells that are discriminated against. What happens to cells? We could say cancer cells are discriminated against, but really what the immune system is doing is in the healing of the body when a cell is cancerous, is going in and in a very discriminating manner, dealing with the epigenomic information that caused the DNA of that cell to go off its mark. As nature repeats, we are cells in the body of humanity. Oh, I know what you're asking here. You're asking about like autoimmune disease, right? When the immune system will attack its own healthy cells. It's a great question. So how does this discrimination work in that way? The evolutionary value of the collective, the immune system of humanity. Yeah, so the correlation is autoimmune disease. There's the correlation right there. And my experience has been that underneath or behind autoimmune disease, often there can be a structure that I used to call ghost viruses, where there is remember I was saying about tuning the strings of the violin, that you only get to come up to be human if you've already integrated wholeness at the deeper levels of your own being. But when you get to be human, the rules change and you have to go back and you have to retune those deeper strings. Well, at those deeper levels of creation, those less physical levels of creation, there are forms like viruses, like bacteria, like parasites, right? People who find themselves like dealing with demonic forms, often it feels like a kind of parasitic, but energy type of body, something like that. So what happens is when a person is dealing with that level of discord in their system, not at the physical material level, but like inside, then sometimes that will trigger or activate the immune system. And the immune system will rise up and go to the area. Like often here, our communication center, it's really common. It's so common for the immune system to attack the thyroid, right? The thyroid. It's so common for it to attack the thyroid. What is the thyroid? The thyroid is the messenger. The thyroid is the postman who says, hey, you're going on a great journey. It's not what you planned. It's not what you wanted necessarily. It's not what you thought was going to happen, but you're going to go on this amazing journey. And on this journey, you will become more yourself. Your divine essence will become infused into your being, and it's going to be great. But a lot of times when a person thought that they were going to do something else, because as we talked a long time yesterday about the hero's journey and how it's not that much fun. And it's challenge, it has challenges built in, right? There would be no story if the hero didn't have to fight a dragon somewhere in there, right? So it's not easy, it's not comfortable, but it's powerful and it's amazing. So this is what the thymus has to do. It has to say, hey, you're going to do this thing, and it's not going to be comfortable and it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be amazing. And then if here in the heart it's too much, no, I just wanted to stay in the castle and become the king tomorrow and marry the princess, right? So it's like I wanted to go pursue the more ephemeral short-term pleasures, and I'm being told I have to go on this journey where I have to pursue a long-term goal of unification. So this question about how does this discrimination work? Because nature repeats and we are cells in the body of humanity. You can see it's a somewhat complex issue. It's not like there's a one simple answer. But the principle here is that the immune system has to learn to function in a subtle manner as well as a gross manner. The discrimination in both yesterday and today, our healing and our webinar has been focusing on increasing discrimination in the immune system, so that even more precisely and concisely, the immune system is the cells, specifically the cells of the immune system that are designed to seek out and find problems in the body. can do so in a way that really is, again, carried on the platform of truth. It's, again, like your anger, like the anger comes out, but it has to come out on the platform of truth. And then it has to come out in small enough bites that it is integrated, is comfortably, gently integrated into the system. And the immune system, I'm looking to the, what I would call the Devata, or the angelic overseeing organizer or presence that oversees the immune system. That's where the upgrade of intelligence and discrimination has to flow right now in order to support this process. Now, the way it is going to end up unfurling or unfolding into the collective of humanity is that when enough of us as individuals do this upgrade, then eventually, like the 100th monkey effect, we'll start to see that level of truth and intelligence integrated into the behaviors of others. But as humans, we are in this very dynamic junction point of creation where the one is finding its way into its understanding itself as integral to the entire manifest field of creation. So even if somebody is absolutely horrible, even if somebody's absolutely horrible, and of course we have our share of people who've experienced childhood traumas and abuse and dysfunctional families and all kinds of, because we could say, well, discrimination is, there's like the larger discrimination in general in the culture or something like that. But we can also say, but even within families, right? There can, a lot of times the parents just make the rules and they're just like, well, I'm just not going to treat my child with dignity. Why should I do that? They're a child. The universe speaks to each person. Each person has a unique dialogue with the wholeness of creation. And the process, if something horrible is happening, the process is one of finding the deepest hurt of that experience, rather than focusing out and saying, well, I'm going to blame that person or that situation for this pain that I'm experiencing. We look in on the pain. You look directly in on the pain and you find it in yourself. And when your awareness lands upon that piece of suffering deep in the heart, it awakens truth. And the truth is that the deepest, darkest, most malevolent expressions of each one of us are finding their way back to the source of creation. And the channel or the pathway back is through awareness. So focus on that. Oh, that person's being completely unreasonable and ungodly and cruel and unkind. Okay, so how does it make me feel? Because that person, when somebody's really rough, when they're rough on their environment, they're rough on everybody. But some people go through that roughness and become stronger and more grounded and more stable in their own divine grace. And some people go through that roughness and end up losing stability, losing emotional stability. What's the difference? What's the difference? First of all, if you go through the experience of dealing with a very, very difficult person or situation, and you leverage that experience to integrate divine grace into your being, the universe, this is a dialogue between you and the universe. The universe will go, oh, they got that. I don't have to put that problem in front of them again, because clearly they know what they're doing. So that's one point of the process. The other part of the process is that it becomes, what we do is in a way, it's like you shift the rules, right? If we look at, well, the way the society is functioning, the society makes the rules, and there are all these cultural conditioning and so forth. And some people are disadvantaged and other people are more advantaged. But what you do when you shift the rule and you say, this is all about the universe and I, my individuality in the universe, having a dialogue, then you shift the rules and you say, it's not about you. It's not about this other person. If you think, well, it's the other person's fault that I feel bad, well, then you've given them your power. So it's about you bring the power back here. You redefine the rules for yourself. This is about me dealing with this feeling that I'm having. And what happens is when you put the attention, the focus on the feeling, it allows you to witness that feeling, to not be gripped by it. As long as you're not dealing with some darkness that's inside of you, that you're always reacting to the darkness, and there's a part of you that never is free or independent of that darkness. But when you put the attention there, and it's like you witness it from the outside, you're like, hey, I see you. There's something quite nasty here that I am directly experiencing emotionally. This is me experiencing this nasty thing. And then the awareness goes on at non-judgmental, not self-sabotaging, not beating yourself up because it's there, but just looking. And it gently says, I know that you exist in this creation because you're trying to go back home. You're trying to embody divinity. You're trying to not see yourself as separate from the divine, but know through direct experience that you are integrated with divine being. And here is the flow of my awareness, which is divine being. As the flow of my awareness goes on to this dark area, it changes it, because it cannot help it. Our awareness transforms whatever it touches. It is pure source material, so it wakes up the divine in whatever it touches. Even if you're putting your attention on something horrible, you wake up the divine. You wake up the divine. You're like, wait a minute. It's not separate. And this is the truth that comes in, right? And as that truth wakes up, that pure, very, very pure material of truth wakes up riding on the vehicle of awareness, it opens up that expression of creation to its divine nature. It allows the grace to flow in. And what we find is that the darkest, most malevolent aspects of ourself are actually some of the most powerful tools that we have to deal with problems and to perform our function as human beings, interfacing with a world that has challenges and problems built into it. There's so much in that. There's so much. Thank you for that incredible question. Your healing sessions and webinars helped me to release judgments on myself. Great. And be more aware when I judge others. Oh, God bless you. Oh, God bless you. Oh, God bless you. It's hard not to. It's hard not to judge others these days, right? Because everybody's at a different place in their process. Everybody has integrated a different amount of divine being and divine energy in themselves. And like that little child who's trying to navigate through, how do I deal with anger as a human being, right? They look to the parents and they're like, dang, my parents didn't figure this out yet. Now what do I do? Now who's going to teach me, right? You become your own best teacher. Awareness, it has no constraints on it. It can go through space and time like nothing. And it brings the divine with it wherever it goes. So that's the only thing that we get from today's webinar. May that be useful to everyone. I hope that's really, really useful. And in the meantime, loving your immune system and supporting the increased, continued, even after this webinar finishes, the increased discrimination and sensitivity in the immune system and power, because as you master your own darkest feelings, then the immune system also becomes more robust, because the immune system absolutely has to use those darker energies in order to take out invaders. That's the way it works. So may everybody in this whole webinar from here and henceforth into the future experience a tremendous upgrowth and uptick of balanced, appropriate functioning in the immune system, healthy functioning, powerful functioning. May you find yourself being so sensitive that you eliminate viruses before they ever get a chance to even really get in and really take a big hold on you. And may you enjoy feeling really healthy, more healthy than ever going forward. Thank you, everyone, for being with me. Oh, the raised hands. Thank you. I love you. And sorry I didn't answer all the questions. Oh, so many beautiful, amazing, amazing questions. Well, I'll have to look through these questions and maybe make some little videos about them for YouTube or something. Thank you, everyone, for thinking deeply with me and offering your light into today's session. I really appreciated it. I appreciate it. Going forward, I appreciate my love to everyone. Thank you.